Johnny Talk Sports in with the Week 6 college football predictions, and what a week of college football we are in store for. We have got the Red River Showdown, Oklahoma and Texas. Always a great matchup, always a great rivalry. We have got Georgia going on the road to take on Auburn after picking up a dominant 37-0 win over Arkansas last week. We have got Arkansas and Ole Miss looking to bounce back from their first loss of the season last week, and we have a top 4 showdown. In my opinion, the game of the year, Penn State and Iowa. Big Ten implications and college football playoff implications are on the line in this matchup. But before I get to the Week 6 college football predictions, I do got to go over my newest top 10. Now, I made a video on Thursday, I believe it was, how Week 5 and Week 6 were going to set the tone for the rest of the season. And after this week, we will be at around the halfway point of the 2021 college football season. And I think that we had some questions get answered this past weekend. And I think that these questions, the way that these questions are answered, is going to be part of that tone that gets set for the rest of the year. For example, Alabama and Georgia. They look like the two best teams in college football. But you can't just pencil them in. You can't just Sharpie them in to the SEC title game or the college football playoff or even the national championship game just yet. There is still more than half of the season left. And anything can still happen, especially when we get into November, because that is really when a lot of things tend to happen. But right now, they look like the two best teams in college football. And we'll get questions answered this week that I think will set the tone for the rest of the year. Oklahoma, they have yet to play like a top 10 team all season long. And Oklahoma is not in my newest top 10. Because they've yet to play like it all season long. And I'm still waiting for Oklahoma to play like a top 10 team. Penn State and Iowa. This could set the tone with Oregon losing last week. This could set the tone for who is the third best team in college football. Who is that number 3 behind Alabama and Georgia? And I think coming up, we're going to have that question answered. Which team outside of the current top 4? Well, technically 5. Because I also think with Cincinnati's win over Notre Dame on the road, I think it set the tone for Cincinnati. I think that they really control their own destiny at this point. I think if Cincinnati goes undefeated, wins the conference championship, I think you've got to put them in to the college football playoff. I mean, even though the win that they had against Indiana doesn't look as impressive now as it would have back in the preseason when we really hyped up that matchup, Indiana is still a solid program. They had a strong year last year. And Cincinnati will also play SMU in November. And if SMU can keep winning, then that win against SMU is going to look impressive. And unfortunately for Cincinnati, bad news for them though, they've got to go undefeated. They can't slip up. They've got to be perfect. And they were last year in the regular season, and their only loss was to Georgia on a last second field goal. But unfortunately, UCF isn't going to be that big of a win now that we think about it, with Dylan Gabriel being out indefinitely. So it's hard to say, but I still think Cincinnati, I still think they're in a solid position, but I think they might need to have Oklahoma lose twice maybe. Or they might have to have the loser of Penn State and Iowa lose again. That is what could get Cincinnati safely in that playoff. But I still think that they have the right to be in the playoff this season. I mean, they picked up important wins and they have the chance to pick up more important wins later on. So on to my newest top 10 here. Now, this is from left to right. So Alabama at 1, Georgia at 2. that stays the same. Moving up to number 3, I have Penn State. Number 4, I have Iowa. And you can argue, you can debate all you want on who should be 3 and who should be 4, but essentially it doesn't matter because they're going to play each other this week. So whoever wins that is going to be number 3. 5, Cincinnati, which Cincinnati, they're going to move up into that top 4 with whoever loses between Penn State and Iowa. Cincinnati gets to number 4. At number 6, welcome to the top 10, Michigan. Michigan's been so impressive so far, and by the looks of how things are going right now, this could be the year that Michigan finally beats Ohio State. At number 7, I have BYU. Welcome to the top 10, BYU. They have impressive wins over Utah and Arizona State so far this season. And if somehow Baylor can get into the top 25 at some point in the season after BYU could potentially beat them, then that can be another impressive win for the Cougars. Now, number 8, I have Oregon. Oregon lost last week to Stanford in a game where Oregon, they should have ultimately won that game, but they didn't manage the clock good. They managed to take Stanford overtime and they lost. Number 9, I have Ohio State. Now, some could say that Ohio State is the best one-loss team in college football. And some could say that Ohio State, they're starting to get back into rhythm. Even though their games were against Tulsa and Akron and Rutgers, those last couple games since the Oregon loss. But still, I think that fourth quarter against Tulsa, I think ever since then, I think Ohio State's offense starting to get back into rhythm, starting to get going with freshman quarterback C.J. Stroud. And you could, as much as you want to say Ohio State could be the best one-loss team in college football, I still got to honor the fact that Oregon beat Ohio State. So that's why Oregon is 8 and Ohio State is 9. And rounding out my top 10, welcome to the top 10, Oklahoma State. Now, I wasn't sure to put it number 10, whether it was Oklahoma State or Michigan State. I already established that Oklahoma hasn't played like a top 10 team all season long. But I put in Oklahoma State because I think that they have picked up some impressive wins. They beat Kansas State, who is a top 25 caliber team. Even though they're not ranked right now, there's still plenty of time left for them to get back into the top 25. And they had a win over Baylor this past week, another top 25 team. And when I look at the resume from Oklahoma State to Michigan State's best win is against Miami, who should be 1-4, honestly. So that was a difference between putting Oklahoma State at number 10 and Michigan State at number 10. I had never had any intention of putting Oklahoma in that top 10 because they've yet to play like a top 10 team. And if Oklahoma State and Oklahoma had to face off right now in Bedlam, I would give the edge to Oklahoma State. All right. Now that I have my top 10 out of the way, it is time for the Week 6 college football predictions. First game on tap, number 14 Notre Dame is looking to bounce back from their first loss of the year last week to Cincinnati, and they go on the road to take on Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. Not the easiest place to play, and both of these teams have to get their offenses going. Notre Dame ranks 95th in total offense. Virginia Tech, they rank 115th in total offense. Despite Notre Dame's struggles on offense statistically, they're still averaging just under 31 points per game. Now, Notre Dame, they do have strength on third down defense. They rank 10th in third down defense. They are, however, 124th in rushing offense, and that is kind of a surprise when you have a talented running back like Kyron Williams. Virginia Tech, they are also good on third down. They rank 13th in third down defense. Virginia Tech actually also ranks 11th in scoring defense. They are the most disciplined team in college football, as they have been the least penalized team all season in college football. So that could be an equalizer for Virginia Tech. If they can stay off the penalty sheet, like if they can continue to not be penalized, then I think that they have a good chance of winning this game, because you can't just force yourself into long yardage situations. I think this game is going to be close, however, but I think that this could end up being a battle of defenses. I think whichever defense rises to the occasion is going to win this game. And we saw Virginia Tech's defense rise to the occasion opening weekend against North Carolina in that 17-10 defensive slugfest. And I think if Virginia Tech makes this into a defense game, I like their chances to win. But Notre Dame, they have gotten pretty lucky throughout their first few games of the year. As mentioned earlier on in the season, barely beat Florida State, barely beat Toledo. They didn't look that impressive against Purdue. And then they didn't look that good the first 3 quarters against Wisconsin. But a special teams play changed the tide in that game. And they lost last week to Cincinnati. A very good defensive team. And I think Virginia Tech, they pull off the upset here. I think the Hokies pick up a 17-13 point victory. I just think that this is the type of game that Virginia Tech wants. They want this game to be a defensive game. And I think they pull off the upset 17-13. Next, we have number 1 Alabama going on the road to Kyle Field to take on Texas A&M. The Tide are the number 1 team in the country, coming off of a dominant win, 42-21 over Ole Miss. While the Aggies, they are looking to get back on a winning streak, losing 2 games in a row back-to-back to Arkansas and Mississippi State. The Tide are 3rd in the FBS in scoring offense, averaging just over 45 points per game. They're 13th in total defense and 26th in total defense as well. However, Texas A&M is, despite losing 2 in a row, they're still 5th in scoring defense, only giving up about 12.6 points per game. And this is a question that myself and a lot of followers and fans of Texas A&M football wonders, could we see Eli Stowers get put into this game? Unfortunately, they won't put him into the game until they're losing 52-0 in the third quarter. But Zach Calzada, I don't understand, why is he struggling so much? I thought that the quarterback race between Haynes King and Zach Calzada was close. I thought Jimbo Fisher himself said that game was close, that battle was close. It just hasn't looked like it. It looked like Haynes King won that quarterback battle by more than what he was trying to say. And Texas A&M's offense has really looked lost with Calzada under center. And it appeared that they had to have been carried by the running game. That's what had to be done. They were carried by Isaiah Spiller and Devon Achane in the Colorado game when Calzada had to come in. And ultimately, the running game, they didn't look the best against Arkansas, but after Isaiah Spiller had that 69-yard run, Jimbo Fisher completely abandoned the run. And that's just kind of what happens sometimes when these coaches or players in general, in any sport, they just get these big contract extensions. And A&M just gave Jimbo Fisher an extension before the season began. And ultimately, Jimbo Fisher just he's just not living up to par. He's not just living up to the expectations right now. But either way, this game doesn't really matter. The question is, how many points does Alabama really score? Because, Texas A&M, they have some of the loudest fans in college football, one of the toughest places to play. And maybe the fact that this is a primetime game instead of the 3:30 Eastern game then maybe it could benefit them in a way because it's a night game, and night games, anything can happen. But Alabama should win like 52-7. Maybe A&M gets a touchdown on the board. But either way, the Tide are going to roll as they usually do. Next, we have number 9 Michigan and Nebraska. Michigan in the top 10 this week. And Nebraska, they picked up a confidence win last week against Northwestern in a game that has been historically close. Nebraska managed to blow out Northwestern this past weekend. And I think it's a good thing that they did, because I think that it's a confidence booster moving forward. I think that's the best offense that we've seen from Nebraska since the end of Adrian Martinez's freshman season. And how is Nebraska going to pull out this upset? Well, they are surprisingly only a 3-point underdog as of right now. Despite Michigan being 6th in scoring defense, only allowing just under 13 points a game, and they're 11th in scoring offense. So this Michigan offense can score some points. They're 7th in rushing offense. However, Michigan is a top 15 defense, as they rank 15th in total defense. But for Nebraska, 13th in scoring defense. And how they're going to pull off the upset is by running the football and by dominating on first down, making second and third down a lot more manageable. And Nebraska can do it because Nebraska is 3rd in first down offense. They are also 5th in time of possession. So Nebraska can just run the football well. If they can run the football like they did last week and take extended drives, keeping Michigan's offense on the sidelines, Nebraska can pull off this upset. However, can Nebraska's defensive line get to Michigan's QB? Can they get to the quarterback? Because Michigan's offensive line has only allowed 1 sack all season long. And I think this game can actually go either way. I think Nebraska will once again play close, but maybe not necessarily win, because we've seen that happen against even Illinois, even though Nebraska should have ultimately beat Illinois. I mean, Oklahoma, they played them close. Michigan State, they played them close. Despite Michigan being 7th in rushing offense, Nebraska contained Kenneth Walker really well a couple weeks ago, the country's leading rusher. I believe they only held him to about 67, 68, 69 rushing yards. And Nebraska's defense also held Michigan State to 12 total yards of offense in the second half. But Nebraska ultimately beat themselves. But if Nebraska plays clean football, if they extend drives, dominate on first down, they will pull off the upset. I unfortunately only think that they will do 2 of these 3 things, as I think Nebraska, they once again have a heartbreaking close loss. I think Michigan wins 24-21. Next, we have number 6 Oklahoma and number 21 Texas, the Red River Showdown. Always a great rivalry, always a great game. Now, Oklahoma, I'm still waiting for them to play like a top 10 team, and they haven't all season long. And by the way that they've been playing, it seems like they're due for a loss at some point coming up. Oklahoma ranks 43rd in total offense, which is not what we're used to seeing, especially with Spencer Rattler. They're getting a lot of hype coming into the season as him being the favorite to win the Heisman, the favorite to be the number 1 pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. He has not lived up to those expectations. They're only allowing, however, 19 points per game, which kind of is surprising because it's felt like they've given up a lot more per game. But they did allow 102 rushing yards against Kansas State last week. And the reason why that's relevant, Texas ranks 5th in rushing offense, and Bijan Robinson is 2nd in the country in rushing yards, only behind Kenneth Walker. So if he can get going in this Texas offense, then I think Oklahoma is doomed in this game. The only loss Texas has had this season is to a very underrated Arkansas team even though they got blown out by Georgia, they still got blown out by the second best team in college football. And with the way Oklahoma has been playing this season, they're due for a loss, in my opinion. And I think it comes here. I think Texas strikes the upset in this game. I think it's going to be a shootout, in my opinion. I'm going to say in the neighborhood of 41-35. I think Spencer Rattler makes a critical mistake in the fourth quarter that will cost Oklahoma this game. But I do, however, think that we're going to finally see that offense start to click. We kind of saw a little bit of it last week against Kansas State, but their defense has been and still is a concern. Despite only allowing 19 points per game, they had a dominant lead against Kansas State in that second half, but they allowed them to get back in the game. And I think if that happens again this week against Texas, I think Texas capitalizes and pulls off the upset, which I think is what's going to happen. I have Texas pulling off the upset. Next, we have Georgia and Auburn. Number 2, Georgia. Number 18, Auburn. Auburn is coming off a big win on the road last week against LSU, while Georgia is coming off of a dominant performance at home against Arkansas, a 37-0 final score. The second game in a row where Georgia has pitched a shutout. Now, we know just how good this Georgia defense is. They are first in total defense and first in scoring defense. JT Daniels, the starting quarterback, didn't play last week. Stetson Bennett instead stepped in. And will Stetson Bennett start again this week? Kirby Smart did say that JT Daniels will be practicing throughout the week, and he is day-to-day. But either way, though, I think it's possible that Georgia might be just fine. Now, the key for Auburn, can Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter get the running game going? We saw Arkansas, despite them having such a great offense, they could move the football on Georgia's defense. I mean, they had a couple plays where they were able to get something going, especially one play, but it got called back to an offensive penalty. Can Auburn's defense also to keep the Tigers in the game? They're only allowing 16 points per game. So can the defense force short fields for their offense? I'm going to say that Georgia, despite this being a road game, despite what happened last time when Georgia was ranked so highly and they went on the road, they got absolutely blown out. But I think this is a different Georgia team now. Georgia's defense only allowed 2 touchdowns all season long. And I still think Georgia's defense will allow maybe a touchdown or 2 this week. Maybe even more than that. But I still think Georgia, James Cook and Zamir White, they are leading the backfield for the Bulldogs. And they were really impressive last week against Arkansas. I still think Georgia wins by at least 14 points. Even if we kind of see their defense kind of give up some touchdowns. I'm going to say Georgia wins at least 31-14. Next, we have number 13 Arkansas and number 17 Ole Miss. Both of these teams looking to bounce back from their first loss of the season last week. And I still think that these two teams, despite what we saw last week, I don't necessarily think that Arkansas was fraudulent or Ole Miss was fraudulent after seeing these two teams face off last week against one of the two best teams in college football. I still think that there's potential that they can still have a phenomenal season at the end of the year. I mean, I think the winner of this game is going to be in a good position to end up in a New Year's Six bowl game. And that would be quite the accomplishment for either of these programs, especially Arkansas, because just a few years ago, Arkansas was at the bottom in college football. And now Sam Pittman has turned that program around. And for Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin is starting to turn the corner for Ole Miss. Arkansas is ninth in total defense. And that is a huge factor in this because Ole Miss is third in total offense. With Matt Crowell under center, Ole Miss has looked like one of the best offenses in college football. And Ole Miss, they really gave Alabama a challenge in the beginning. I mean, they were aggressive. They went for it on fourth down 3 times. They were able to convert the first 2 times. It looked like they were moving the ball at will on that Alabama defense. But that fourth down play, they couldn't get the fourth down conversion. And that is what really ruined early momentum for Ole Miss in that game. You do got to admire the aggression, but you've got to live with the consequences when it doesn't work out. And that is what Lane Kiffin had to do. Now, Arkansas, they did get shut out by Georgia this past weekend, but Georgia's the best defense in college football. And Arkansas, they didn't move the ball that well against Georgia at all, if they even moved it at all. I mean, there was maybe a couple times where we kind of saw some potential at Arkansas's offense in that game, especially the one big play on offense that got called back due to an offensive penalty. But there is still a lot on the line in this game, as mentioned. I think to be in good position to have a New Year's Six Bowl. Arkansas is second pass defense. And if Arkansas can get the running game going, because we know how good Arkansas's running game can be. We've seen that throughout the season so far, except for last week. Ole Miss just allowed 171 rushing yards to Brian Robinson last week against Alabama. So I think that is going to be a huge key in this game. And I am going to, I'm going to go with the home field advantage for Ole Miss because no road win is easy in the SEC. The crowd will make you earn it. And I think this is going to be a hard-fought game. I think Ole Miss wins this in a shootout. I'm going to say 38-35. I think in the early portion of the game, we might not see some points on the board. We could see the defenses rise to the occasion early. But I think it's going to be a shootout. With Ole Miss winning, I'm going to 38-35. Something along those lines. But I think Ole Miss wins a close one. And finally, we have the game of the week. In my opinion, the game of the year. Number 4, Penn State. Number 3, Iowa. And there are major Big Ten and college football playoff implications on the line in this matchup. We have got 2 of the best scoring defenses in all of college football. Iowa ranks second in total defense, only allowing an average of 11.5 points per game, while Penn State is third, only allowing an average of 12 points per game. So this is going to be a good one. However, I think this game is going to come down to which offense is able to produce just a bit more over the other. Because we know that this is going to be a defensive battle. And it will come down to which offense can make that big play to get into scoring position. Who's going to take advantage of a big play? Because Iowa, they have been getting carried by their defense so far, as they rank 118th in total offense. While Penn State, they're 52nd in total offense. However, Iowa is 7th in total defense, while Penn State is 33rd. And despite only allowing an average of 12 points per game, Penn State, they've still given up quite a bit of yards in their competitive games this season, especially against Auburn and Wisconsin. So if Iowa wants to win this game, they've got to run the football. As Penn State, in those 2 big games that they have wins in against Wisconsin and Auburn, they had a hard time stopping the run. And Penn State, they have been a bend but don't break defense. They were able to get turnovers on Wisconsin when they were on the doorstep of scoring a touchdown, as Penn State's defense really carried them past Wisconsin in that opener. Now, I think that this is going to be a low-scoring game. I think, as mentioned, it will come down to which offense I think will produce just a bit more, which offense is able to get the more big plays. And I think that that is going to go to Penn State, mainly because I don't know what to expect out of Iowa's offense. I mean, we saw Iowa put up 51 against Maryland last week, but they were set up with short field. They were set up with a shortened field, as their defense was able to produce 6 turnovers against Maryland last week, which is a huge contribution to why they are leading the nation in turnover margin. And I think by a score of 20-14, I think Penn State wins this matchup against Iowa. And this game, it will establish, in my opinion, who is that third team in college football. Who's that third best team in college football right now? We know Alabama and Georgia are 1 and 2, and this game will determine who is number 3. So I have Penn State winning by a score of 20-14. That is all I have for the Week 6 college football predictions. Like, share, and subscribe. If there is another game that I did not predict in this video and you want me to make a prediction, leave it in the comments down below and I will respond to you. Until next time, have a wonderful day.